Are you a businesswoman who's finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. If you want to see how your presentation skills are doing, please go to our free 4-minute assessment at www.speakforresultsquiz.com. Elizabeth uses her 30 years of experience as an opera director to help business professionals become better presenters. This special series explores the relationship between business and art. And now, on to the show. Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results, the relationship between business and art. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and my guest today is Maestro Steven White, who is a dear friend. He's a thinker. He's not only an opera conductor and an orchestra conductor, he's also artistic director of Opera Roanoke in Virginia, and one of the people who has traveled the world and has really interesting thoughts about fundraising, speaking, shaping a phrase, and how art is important in all our lives. Steven White was praised by Opera News as a conductor who squeezes every drop of excitement and pathos from the score. He's one of North America's premier conductors in both the symphonic and the operatic repertoire, including conducting at the Metropolitan Opera, Moscow Philharmonic, London's Philharmonia Orchestra, and in Baltimore, Montreal, Spoleto, Nashville, all over America, also on a Chandos recording of arias featuring his wife, soprano Elizabeth Futrall. And one of the fun parts is he's been on TV. In December 2013, Maestro White conducted the tribute to Martina Arroyo as part of the Kennedy Center Honors Concert, which was broadcast nationally on CBS. As I said, he's the artistic director of Opera Roanoke and is someone who's done the business of arts. He's an artist. He is a lover of nature and a philosopher and one of my favorite people to talk to. So now on to the interview. Steven White, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so great to see you.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you, when I was thinking about when I first created the podcast, Speakers Who Get Results, I thought, and I'm going to ask some of my opera friends to talk about it because I understand, I see every day how I use what I learned in opera in the business world. And I said, so I'm going to ask Steven, and I've got some opera singers I want to ask, et cetera. So it took me sort of 3/4 of a year to get around to doing this, but I'm really excited to have you here.
Great.
Thanks. So, Steve, before we get into the meat of it, who would be your dream interview? If you could share the stage with somebody who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Well, I mean, there are so many people, obviously. I mean, so many great women and men who have lived in this world that you'd love to learn something from. For me, I'm a conductor, a musician, someone who works in the opera world and loves great music. And so, of course, there are a great many composers I'd love to talk with, a great many performers. But I think the one that I would like to have an interview with and sit down with would be Gustav Mahler. Gustav Mahler was a composer, basically at the end of the 20th century, lived from 1860 to 1911. And he's known
End of the 19th century, you mean?
What did I say?
Yeah, right. That's right. 19th century into 20th century.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you.
The Belle Époque.
Exactly, the fin de siècle, all of that. And born in 1860, died in 1911. He is most known for his 9 symphonies, plus another one that he didn't finish, and Das Lied von der Erde, and his songs. But he spent his whole life conducting opera. And so for me, it's so interesting because this composer, whose music I adore perhaps above all others, spent his life, his career, doing what I do. Of course, he did it on a very, very high level, but he started in provincial towns in Europe, made it all the way to the Vienna State Opera and eventually the Metropolitan Opera. And but all that entire time, his preferred activity was composing, and didn't really get to do that full time. The other thing that's so interesting about Mahler, and I think that it would be interesting for anyone to sit in on this interview, he described himself as 3 times homeless. That is to say, he was born in Moravia, in the Austrian Empire. So he was Moravian in Austria, a homeless Moravian in Austria. Furthermore, he was an Austrian in the German-speaking world, and he felt sort of homeless there. And then he was Jewish, and he was a Jew throughout the entire world, and particularly at a time when anti-Semitism crept into absolutely everything. So I think it would be so interesting to discuss with him all of those dynamics and how he conquered all of that and was able to stay true to his ideals.
Didn't he also have to run one of these big companies?
Oh, he did. For 10 years, he was the director of the Vienna State Opera from 1897 to 1907. I mean, and that's a huge amount of time. His successors lasted just months. And but the intrigue at when I say the Vienna State Opera, it was not the Vienna State Opera at the time. It was the Vienna Court Opera. That is to say, it was under the auspices of the Habsburgs themselves. And so having to walk that fine line between his artistic identity, his artistic integrity, and his ideals, but also have to play, to kiss the ring from time to time. I mean, just an incredible dynamic that I learned so much when I study Mahler. I'm so in awe of his personal character and integrity. So,
it'd actually be, and in today's terms, he had to do what anybody running a nonprofit do, which is, cozy up to the donors. And anybody who's starting a company or any sort of founders have to cozy up to the investors. He was answerable to the money people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so he must have had to do a lot of fundraising pitches.
Oh, he did. And the other thing he had to do, which is, I think, a lesson for all of us, is we often have to work for people that do not share our values. And how do we walk that line? I think of government employees sometimes that might have completely different political philosophies than their employers. But how do you walk that line between being true to yourself and also being true to your employer? I mean, I think it takes tremendous imagination and how you get on without selling your soul, but maintaining your own integrity and feeling good about yourself, while at the same time serving the needs of your employers in a way that is appropriate. It's a challenge.
Yeah, serving your employers in a way that is that takes care of your people, and also promotes the work. I think that's the thing. And there are a lot of people who just, you swallow things you're not happy with in order to promote the work. And when it gets to the point that you can't stand it anymore, then you give up the work you love and leave.
Right.
Sometimes by your choice and sometimes not.
Well, the interesting thing about the music world and the art world, in theory, of course, I'm talking about theoretically here, yes, we're all on the same team. We're all on the same. We all believe, we assume in the value of art and great music to improve people's lives, but yet the music world, the art world is just as competitive, if not more so, than any other profession. And and recognizing that we're all on the same team, but yet competing on that same team. Again, that's a challenge, which is why I tell people, you don't go into music because you've got a career in your heart. You go into music because you've got a song in your heart. And don't forget the song, because the career sometimes gets in the way of the joy for the reason you went into music in the first place.
Actually, I've been thinking recently over the course of recording these interviews for this series, I really realized that the reason why I moved into training, using my opera experience to train business presenters full time and let opera go, was because it had stopped being fun. It was about checking off the boxes. And every once in a while, there would be a moment where I'd be thrilled by the music, but I couldn't be transported anymore because I knew too much about how it was built.
Right.
It's like, the thing you should never see made, never watch made, is you never watch Laws Made, and you should never watch Sausage. It was kind of like I'd been working in a sausage factory and I couldn't enjoy the taste of the sausage anymore.
That's right. I understand that.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that it took me a year to let go, but I'm really grateful that I did that, because now I'm learning new things, and every client I have teaches me something new, and it's not checking off the same boxes anymore. I envy you being able to do symphonic work, because the other thing with opera, as a stage director, the ones that are staged it's the same top 20 most of the time. You and I met doing a Rossini piece that nobody ever does. So that was fun, because we were all exploring it together.
Right.
But that was just a joy. Anyway, that's sort of a digression. I want to talk to you a little bit about, as someone who comes to life because you have a song in your heart, because you are so musically gifted and analytical. Can you talk a little bit about shaping a phrase? Shaping a phrase, I work with I tell people about the melody of the message all the time. And I would love to know how you have to speak to raise money for your company, but you also have to teach people to sing. How does that mesh together in your mind?
Well, it's very interesting, because we talk about music as being the universal language. You've heard that phrase before. Mm-hmm. Oh, music is a universal language. But then it begs the question, well, what does it mean? And my process, I suppose, in terms of interpreting music, and then once I've interpreted how I communicate that to others, is very, very personal. So, for example, the way I would make, let's say, a fundraising talk to some folks is the same way I approach learning a piece of music. I want to know very specifically what I think the value of, if I'm raising money, if I'm trying to persuade somebody to give money to a cause, I have to be persuaded of that cause myself before I even begin. Yes. If I'm not persuaded of that cause, then I might be able to use all the best words. I might be able to do all kinds of things that make sense. But the passion and the truth of what I'm trying to get the people to whom I'm speaking to see and to respond to, it's going to be false. That's the way I approach music. I really feel that every phrase has to have direction. We're speaking in time. Notes follow, one note follows another note, follows another note. Not every note is exactly the same in terms of importance. They all have their context. But the way we do that, the way I do it, it has to do with preparation. I spend hours upon hours, weeks upon weeks, sometimes years upon years, studying a piece of music to try to make the determination of what it means to me, how I feel it should progress. Then, once I am persuaded, it is so much easier for me to persuade my orchestra or the singers with whom I'm working, or the group of board members or wealthy donors that I think have potential to realize my vision. So you've got to have that vision. I believe you've got to have that vision. And in terms of interpretation, someone asked me just this morning, actually, I got to know, what do you do on performance days to get ready for a performance? And the fact is, I do a lot of visualizing. I'm told that basketball players can improve their free throw shooting by visualizing themselves standing at the line making free throws. Well, I believe in that. I'm not a good free throw shooter, but I do believe, particularly when I'm conducting, let's say an opera, I visualize the entirety of the thing. I visualize my players seated around me, and I go through it, and it has to do with sort of anticipating the joy, anticipating the potential of what it is I'm going to try to do in that performance, and it calms me, because by the time I get to that performance, I walk out there, I've already been there in my mind all day, and there are fewer surprises, and so I can adapt and react with more flexibility.
I love that. And I can hear a yeah, but in there, because you were saying, so you were saying, like every phrase needs to have a rhythm. Every phrase needs to have a meaning. Well, if we've got to do a speech next week, we can't really polish every single sentence, every single word.
Well,
so if you've got a big opera with a whole lot, you've got maybe how many players do you have in the orchestra, say for a Verdi piece?
Oh, 55.
55. Okay, so you've got 55 people in the orchestra, and you've got the chorus, and you've got the soloists, and all of that. How do you balance shaping each piece with the arc of the whole?
Well, I think that's very important, and it's a great question. We use the word organically, or we talk about things being organic, and it's almost always a very positive thing to say. We want things to be organic. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, my wife has planted some tomato plants outside. Being home all summer. We're rarely home all summer, but this time we are, as all of us have been. And so Elizabeth decided to plant some tomato plants. Well, of course, tomato plants will do whatever they want, but unless you have a stake for them to climb on, then they're going to go all over the place, and actually they won't thrive. So to me, in trying to have an organic kind of result in a performance, particularly of as you say, like a long opera with lots of big parts, I've got to find where the stakes are in that piece of music. The high points, if you will. That's why form is so great.
Why what? Form?
Form. As in the form of a piece, the framework of the piece, the way it's designed. When it comes to speeches, and when I have to give a speech, or sometimes when I have to write a program notes or something, I always try to find, okay, what are the 3 or 5 or 2? What are those things that I most need to communicate? I really focus on those things, and then allow an organic flow from one thing to the next. In other words, they take on the details of whether or not I use this particular adjective or that particular adjective aren't nearly as important as the concrete specifics. And the rest is just style. The rest is just style, as I see it. It's interpretive, and there, you can actually have a sense of in the moment about it. But the way you can have successful in the moment kind of results that don't sound studied is that you have studied and you have made a determination on several points.
Exactly. That's why I always say, speak for results. Here I am talking about strategic speaking, speakers who get results. What's the result that you want? And then work backwards so that you're always trying to get it to talk, that everything leads towards that. As I think about it, that's actually how the way I would approach an opera is, the arc of the whole, and how you know how it's going to end. So you have to build it up so that you're really set up for the end, so that when the end gets there, you really want it. But also, if there are great moments, I would listen to it, and I would often do my best work in the car, because I would be playing it in the car, and then I just drive somewhere and I would go, and an image would pop up, and I said, if I want this moment to look like that, how can I set it up so that when we get there, that is the next and only possible step?
Right.
And it's the same with the speech. And you've got flexibility along the way, so you're not absolutely by rote. But
that's I find that the amount of brain involved, that is to say, the thinking aspect, is just as important as the heart aspect. When it comes to art. In this sense,
in anything, yes,
and basically life is art. I don't care whether it's how you go out and you go to a particular parking lot and you see that this is poorly designed, and then you go to another parking lot that is well designed. That's art. I mean, form and function. I think that that most great art is defined in a certain respect by a frame or by the form. Sometimes that form can be deliberately withheld, and that's a conscious choice. But I think intention has to be paramount in what we do. If we do not have intention, that is to say, we're moving in a direction because we believe in this. And that's the same as if you're playing a Mozart piano sonata, or whether you're giving a speech, to fundraisers, or or trying to convince somebody that they should be doing the right thing, like wear masks. You can't insult people, but you have to have intention, you have to have logic, and you have to build in such a way that the conclusion is inevitable. And not everyone will respond to everything you do. Not everyone loves classical music. I've sometimes I'm just amazed. I'll be do a performance of a symphony or an opera or something, and it was one of the great moments in my life. I thought it just clicked. It was the most thrilling thing that And then I'll ask somebody who's close to me, well, what'd you think? Yeah, it was okay. We cannot guarantee results, but
right.
what we will guarantee is if we do not prepare, we're guaranteed to get fewer results.
Right. And the other part of that, I would say, is you have to take the audience into account.
Right.
Because who's listening, and what do you want them to do? You want them to applaud or cry or laugh, which is much harder.
Right.
The amount of preparation it takes to do comedy, the amount of preparation it takes to do humor in a speech, and getting the rhythm right, and will it be something that appeals to everybody? When I do presentations in Austria or Germany, I'm not going to use the same jokes that would work in America, because there's
right.
different cultural references. So
exactly. Knowing the audience is so terribly important, and it's very funny to me how, and I'm sure you've had this same experience when you're watching a television program. Let's say it's a series that about doctors, or it's a series about law. Every now and then you'll see a reference to classical music, and it's always done wrong. Always. In other words, it'll have someone playing the violin in the wrong hand, or it'll have that kind of thing. And I think to myself, as often as they make those mistakes in classical music, they're probably making those same mistakes in law and in medicine and whatever else it's about. It's just that I don't know anything about it. And so from an audience standpoint, they're not worried about trying to speak to a classical music expert. They're trying to get somebody who's interested in these other things, and I just
they're making a show.
Yeah, they're making a show, and
it's artistic license, right?
It's just interesting to me how you can't take anything for granted, I remember one of the very first times I conducted here in Virginia in Roanoke, at Opera Roanoke. In fact, it was the very first time I conducted, and this was 20 years ago. My grandparents, who had never seen an opera in their entire life, they said, "What opera are you going to be conducting?" I said, "Oh, it's Carmen." And I waited, and then I realized they'd never heard of Carmen. Okay, which doesn't make them ignorant people. They were some of the most precious, wonderful, intelligent people that ever existed, and have influenced my life tremendously. But they'd never heard of Carmen.
So did they recognize ya da 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 when that came in?
I don't think so. These are wonderful Appalachian, born and reared, authentic hillbillies, but they had that when they did recognize things. I mean, they taught me so much, but I had to realize that my experiences are completely different. Even if everyone in my life around me knew what Carmen was, or at least knew that it was an opera, or at least had heard of it. My grandparents never had. And but it's valuable to recognize the fact that we're talking at all times to people who may not understand or may not have experiences with the things that we take as second nature. And I know for a fact that there's so many things that I don't know anything about. And when people start doing shop talk around me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just an idiot and they have lost me. So,
I have to tell you that this is my life now, because so I work with high-level women in tech who aren't being heard. They've got a seat at the table, they're a senior director or something else, and they're usually it's the problem solvers, and they fix things. And because their department works well, nobody pays attention to them. They're taken for granted, and so a lot of what I do is help them do speeches or talk about the way they speak so that they're positioned as somebody important.
Right.
What that means for me is that I have to help somebody talk about cloud services, or when I'm working with some of the medical professionals that I work with, and I sit through a super technical webinar and they're asking me to make comments, and now I know that if I'm going to do that, if it's a super tech, I'll get someone who's a technical expert to say, okay, did you get the science? Someone else says, did you get the science right? I'm the one that says, as you do this, hey, you might think about X or Y or something like that. It's fascinating. I'm learning a lot. It's like learning a whole new language. So I never got around to Russian. Maybe learning my way around tech is my next language.
That'd be great.
Now, I want to ask you, in terms of presenting, as I was looking at the various, you've actually already answered most of my questions. So this is fun.
Sorry.
No, this is good. It's perfect. You just push the button and go. There he goes. This is why I wanted to interview you. There were people I wanted to interview who said, I don't know, the phone rings and I do the job or I don't. I say, okay, love you. You're not going to be a fit for this podcast. One of the things that people worry about a lot when they're speaking is, how do I talk about something that I care about that everybody else is talking about? How do I make myself interesting and different? What is it? What can I say that no one else is saying? Well, if you're in opera and you're doing Carmen for the umpteenth time, so the people in the audience have seen 1,500 Carmens, or the singers have sung Carmen 1,500 times, how do you make it interesting, new, personal? How do you make it interesting?
Well, that's a fantastic question.
You know where I'm going, right?
I do, and when we think about great singers, let's just say, and again, I don't want to make the presumption that everyone here in this audience knows, the names of great singers, but they will understand whether they're pop singers or whether they're classical music singers, that the ones that we remember are the ones that are distinctive. Michael Jackson sounds like Michael Jackson. Doesn't sound like anybody else. Leontine Price sounds exactly like Leontine Price and nobody else. And so what we're trying to achieve with art and with expression is a distinctive individuality. Now, how do we get that distinctive individuality? Yes, of course, our voice is our voice. We all sound like ourselves. We all have our turns of phrases, but there are common technical problems that will often reduce our individuality. So, for example, if I'm a singer and I've got a tremendous problem singing flat, that's what people are going to notice. They're not going to notice, oh, Steven White, that great baritone. Wow, he's got a great voice. Or so-and-so with that great soprano. Or look at that person who plays the piano brilliantly. I just wish that they wouldn't play so many wrong notes. So the thing that the two elements that I believe are important here in terms of achieving individuality is to work as hard as you possibly can on the technical aspect of what we're talking about. I know that you spend a lot of time giving tips on how technically to prepare, how technically to, whether it's standing in front of a mirror, whether it's doing this, maybe even mechanical things that in and of themselves are not the end game, but they are the things that will allow you to get that fluidity where all of a sudden the actual identity of you is coming across because you have eliminated technical distractions.
It's the craft that allows you to be a channel for art.
Exactly.
Or be a channel for whatever you are passionate about, whatever you're talking about. Singers learn early on that you have to work with the muscles of the throat and the breath and the lips and the tongue. And that's something in order to produce the sound. Speakers take that for granted. We just take it for granted that we talk the way we talk. And yet, speaking is a physical act. And when we get to, some of those technical things that some of my current clients talk about, the technical things, how you pronounce something, you just have to train your lips and tongue to be able to say international opera director and presentation skills trainer.
Right.
That one took me a while. Yeah.
Well, right. And then the point of all of this work is that eventually it takes on a feeling of effortlessness. And that's where your personality, that's where your passion actually starts to come through. We talk all the time about such and such a singer. Just this effortless production. And that
vocal production, you mean?
I'm talking about vocal production. Yes, thank you. The way in which they sing, which it doesn't sound like it's work at all. It just comes out so naturally. Well, what you don't realize is that probably that person practiced and practiced and practiced and spent all kinds of time and really honing her craft to the point where the art and the expression and the passion and the love has now got a completely free highway, unobstructed with technical issues, unobstructed with barriers, because they have spent the time really to hone that craft.
Exactly. And
I've
really,
said,
yeah.
I've always said that.
Yeah, it's the craft that makes the art. But also, for all that you're talking about, when you're doing a presentation, whether it's over video or live, you are what people are reacting to. People are reacting to all those cues in the background that we don't pay attention to, that are signaling whether you're serious, whether you're authentic, whether you mean what you say. All of that. It's who you are. That's when we talk about speak from the heart, who you are, and there are ways that you can shape it so that it comes through more easily.
Right. And what's interesting, part of the reason that craft and technique is so important is that, if we don't feel passionately about something, and yet we're required to go out and speak about it or deliver it. Let's say I'm supposed to conduct a piece of music that I don't believe in. I don't even like it, but it's my job to go out there. I have a great degree of fear and trepidation that I'm not going to be able to accomplish this. Now, think about the exact opposite. I now feel as though, let's pretend you're speaking about something that is the most important thing in the world. Let's pretend that you're advocating for some cure of some terrible disease, and that you have the ability to raise money for that. And because it's so important for you, you can have a similar kind of fear that, what if I fail in something this important? That's why craft and technique is so important, because it really allows you to rely on basically a scientific approach to everything that you do that allows for that expressive aspect to come forward. And the more important and the more you believe in something, the more important it is to have a reliable technique. I've always said that you could love humanity more than Schiller or more than the world's greatest poet. You can love humanity more than anyone in the world, but if you don't have a synonym for the word nice, you're not going to be able to put it in a very good poem. It's the same way with playing Mozart piano concertos. It's the same way with plumbing. It's the same way with building a building. The more you love it, the more you have to really pay attention to the nuts and bolts, which is why my favorite, my sort of the motto of my life, and it goes back to Gustav Mahler. We were talking about Mahler. In his second symphony, the Resurrection Symphony, there's this phrase, bereite dich zu leben, which of course you know what it means. It means prepare yourself to live. And I love every aspect of that. Those two verbs, prepare. Prepare for what? To live. And that's the reason we prepare. That's the reason we prepare a speech. That's the reason we prepare a symphony. That's the reason we make our bed in the morning, whatever. But it takes preparation. And the preparation is not a dead end. The preparation is so that we can live, so that we can live our life through the music, through the words, through the expression, and through to the results. That's why I love bereite dich zu leben.
Steven White, that is the perfect thing to end this conversation on. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. I love talking to you. I love talking to you things that
we should do it more.
I love that I get to share you with my listeners. So this has been Speakers Who Get Results. And with Maestro Steven White, I've been Elizabeth Bachman. If you're interested in your presentation skills and how you're doing, I invite you to take our free assessment. Only takes 4 minutes at www.speakforresultsquiz.com. That's speakforresultsquiz.com. And there you can see where you are really strong with your presentation skills and where maybe you might need a little bit of support. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.